Okay, so let's do a quick little review of chapter 22. We started this now. This is the great test, the final test of faith for Abraham, and Abraham has been tested since the beginning. If you remember, from the moment he gets the promises of God, and those promises, if you recall, were threefold. There were three things the Lord promised him. If you remember what they were, from Genesis chapter 12. Remember,
Land,
land,
Nation of
ma-
people.
nation of
yeah,
people,
yeah,
and then the
yeah,
third.
And all
yeah.
would be blessed.
That's right. That the will be blessed through him. So it was the land, the descendants of the nation, and the blessing. And every time, so Genesis 15, Genesis 12, we had that promise given to him, and then immediately there's a famine in the land, which drives him out of the land that God had promised him. And then his wife is taken by Pharaoh, um, which puts his descendants in jeopardy. That he doesn't have any descendants yet, and of course the famine just is not a blessing, it's a curse. So everything is going against, all the circumstances are against the promises, and yet God brings him through that. The promises stand, and he comes out of that test with even greater blessing, and he returns to the land. All is restored to him. And that process where God gives the promise and then takes, uh, at least by appearances, what he seems to be promising here. And so there's that test. Do you believe the word, or do you believe your circumstances? Are you walking by faith, or are you walking by sight? That's going to be the test. So once again, now Genesis 22, we have God had just made a promise to Abraham in 21. And if you remember what that promise was, that he gives a little bit more specificity regarding those threefold things: blessing, land, and the nation. What did he say in chapter 21 that Abraham took to heart? If you remember.
Uh, there was a well episode with a well.
Well, there was that well episode, but before that, it was the birth of chapter 20 began with the birth of Isaac. And what was the promise that God gave him regarding Isaac?
That Sarah would have a child and the child would be his heir.
Yes, the nation, for Isaac, through she has the baby, and then she sends off Hagar and Ishmael because of that whole mocking incident. And then the Lord says to Abraham, whatever Sarah says to you, verse 12, do as she says, for through Isaac shall your offspring be named. So it's very specific that it's Isaac is now your son. He is the one that's going to carry on the blessings. It's his descendants who will take the land. Your nation will come through him. Abraham has Ishmael, but he has been sort of disinherited. He has been sent off, so he's no longer a part of this inheritance that we're really focusing on. So
But God does promise that he'll take care of them.
He'll take care of him. Yeah, he'll take care of him, but Ishmael will not inherit that land, and the blessing will not come through Ishmael. It will come through Isaac, and Isaac, his descendants, will inherit that land. So when this test comes, the test that comes to Abraham is what does God tell him to do? That is a test that goes against, at least in appearance, what he promised.
To sacrifice his son.
Yeah. So he tells him to sacrifice his son. If you remember, we talked before about in pagan religions at that time, the sacrificing of children was the norm. That's what they did. They would frequently sacrifice children to their gods. That was the abomination in the days of the kings, when the king of Israel was sacrificing his own sons in the valley and to Baal. That was not shocking. But what was God never calls people to say, he calls it an abomination, and he punished them severely for that. But in this case, it's a real test, because that goes against his promise. God promised that it would be through Isaac that his offspring would be named. Isaac doesn't have any offspring yet. He's not married. He's just a teenager, probably. And now he's called to kill him. So what does Abraham conclude in himself as he's about to go and do this? What if he's going to believe God's word, his promise, and follow his command? What is Abraham's conclusion then about what must happen?
God will somehow save Isaac, whether he brings him back to life. What he has faith from what he's already seen that God will fulfill the promise that he made.
Yeah. And he has every reason to believe that Isaac will be alive at the end of the day. He knows that will happen. He doesn't know how, but he knows that it will happen. If God can look, if God is going to threaten kings in their dreams in order to get Sarah back to him, if God is going to give his 300 men victory over a great army in order to rescue his servant Lot, if God is constantly hearing his prayers and granting him what he's asking as he pleads for Lot, as he does all these things, blessing him every step of the way, and every time he's in trouble, he keeps his promise and rescues him, he will certainly not break that promise. And so he knows, and that's what Hebrews tells us. Hebrews says Abraham knew that God would raise him from the dead. And in a sense, he did, because Abraham was Abraham going to kill his son?
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely, he was going to kill his son. He bound him, he laid him on the altar, and he had his knife in the air, ready to plunge into his son when the Lord finally stops him and says, "Now I know."
On the way up, we'll be back. We will be back.
Yes, that was the verse. Let's see. Before they left, we will go. Yes, verse 5. Stay here with the donkey, and I and the boy will go there and worship and come again to you. Yeah, we will come again to you. He knows it. It has to be that way. Otherwise, God is a liar. If Isaac is dead at the end of the day, and if that's the end of his story, then God is a liar, and that cannot be. It is impossible for God to lie. So, with that, so that's really the test. I think for us, that's the test for each one of us. It's like, do you believe the promises of God? Are you going to interpret your circumstances through what God has promised? Or are you going to interpret things by what things appear to be? So, there are hardships we go through in life, pains and trials of all sorts. Yet we have a promise in Romans 8 that says that God works all things together for the good of those who love him and are called according to his purpose. So we have that promise that he is working everything for a purpose, for our good, even when it doesn't feel or seem that way. And we have to trust his word. Are you going to trust his word when everything else betrays you? And that's the test. That's the real test of faith.
I like R.C. Sproul makes a comment that saving faith is not so much about believing in God. He says even the demons do that. He says, but it's believing God.
Yeah.
And that's a significant difference.
Yeah. And I like the phrase just trusting. I really love that word because belief is so empty today. People just talk about beliefs all the time. But trust, do you trust him? Do you really trust God? Do you trust that he loves you, that he cares about that that he's going to provide for your needs, that you can seek first his kingdom and his righteousness, and he will take care of you? When you really trust that, then it's like what is there to fear? What is there to fear now? And so if I'm at a job and I'm threatened basically with, look, if you're going to keep this job, you need to compromise your values. You need to say things that are not true. You need to abandon your faith if you're going to keep this job. And you're thinking, how can I feed my family? Then the promise comes, seek first his kingdom. All these things will be yours. And to be able to say, I don't know how I'm going to feed my family, but God is going to feed my family. He will take care of me. And I have to stand firm in truth and righteousness, even if it seems to cost me at the moment here. He has to come through. Otherwise, he's a liar, and that cannot be. So Abraham is just such a great example for us, and this is such a powerful scene. And there's so many things to think about as we go through the text of why does God do this? Why would God give him this kind of a test? Let me ask you that question. What are your thoughts on that? Why do you think God would give Abraham this particular kind of test? I mean, why not, why not have Lot, Isaac kidnapped like Sarah was? Why would he tell Abraham to kill his son? That's a horrific test. Yeah, go ahead.
Could it be because of what happened to Jesus, that he sacrificed his only son?
Yeah. Yeah, I think this is a foreshadowing of what is to come. This, by the way, is the central in the books of the law. You're going to see sort of the way things begin, and then there's a way things end, and there's often a center point, like climbing a mountain, where you have a center point to things. So I always pay attention to sort of the start of a story, the end of it, and sort of the climax in it. This here is sort of the climax of in Genesis. It's like it's the most intense scene. It's a long story too. It goes into greater detail than the other ones, especially for Abram. This passage is so rich and deep, and the only other story that really you could say is the climax as well with this one is the Joseph story at the end, when you've got that one, which is also a type of Christ. And so here we have this incredible story. It is, I mean, the whole picture of it. What are some of the elements of this story that reflect the crucifixion of the Son of God?
The wood on Isaac's shoulders.
Okay, the wood. Isaac's carrying the wood. Yeah, Jack.
I was going to say that God provides the sacrifice.
God provides the sacrifice. That's right.
He walks up.
In both cases, it was their only son.
It was the only son, the whom you love. It's exactly what isn't that exactly what God says at the baptism of Jesus? This is my son whom I love. And he says, "This is you're not just your only son, Isaac, but the one you love, whom you love." That's right. There's a few other things too.
He walks up the hill.
Yep.
You mentioned that last week, and big one that I had never thought about. Isaac, you never see him raise a stink. He submits the whole time.
Yeah. And he walks up the same hill that this Mount Moriah is the Temple Mount's going to be that. And so when Christ on the triumphal entry is interesting, is a climb. It's walking up a hill. As he's climbing up from Jericho, he's going up the mountain, up into Jerusalem. There he's going to be handed over. And also yeah, go ahead.
No, go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, please go ahead.
No, I was just gonna. You had said why. I think for the same reason he gives us trials and tribulations. Abraham and we need to see that our faith is real.
Yeah.
You made that comment once in a sermon that faith grows best on the trial, and the trials have a function. And if everything goes well for me, how do I know I don't have phony faith?
Exactly right. Yeah, they test it, they prove us, they grow us too. I mean, it not only does the test, like as a teacher, when you give tests to students, it does two things. The test itself reveals the knowledge or lack of knowledge of the students, but also the taking of the text actually that you learn something as you take the test. Because unlike other things, when you're taking a test, there's a level of fear and focus in the midst of a test that you don't have in a regular experience. When a test or trial comes, there's a fear and a focus. You're looking for answers. So even when people are saying, "Why God? Why is this happening to me?" And that's not a bad question if it's asked with sincerity and not just complaining about things. But yeah, you start to search of what is the meaning of this? What does the Lord want to teach me here through these trials? They're a great blessing, and that's why in our men's Bible study, we made that note of how James tells us, count it all joy when you meet various trials. The testing of your faith produces these things. One thing I wanted to mention was the Abraham is the one who carries the knife and the torch up the mountain with him. He's the one who's going to administer the wrath, in a sense, the death sentence. And that's exactly, it's the father who is the one who puts his son to death, who sacrifices his only son for us. So it's
one of the things that I just never really, I don't know, it just never really occurred to me was the significance of where he did it. Because it's not like he just said, there's hills all around you, or mountains around you. Pick one close, And no, it was what was it, a 3-day journey to get there?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was significant as to where he wanted him to try and do it.
Yeah, exactly right. And that's the basis for Jerusalem being what it is, the city of God, the city of peace, the place of the temple where the sacrifices will be made. Well, let's finish up our chapter here. I think we left off verse 14. So 15 to 19. Let's see, am I going to lose my spot there? Of course I am. Bob Fowler, would you read that for us? That paragraph 15 to 19 of chapter 22.
And the angel of the Lord called to Abraham a second time from heaven and said, by myself I have sworn, declares the Lord, because you have done this and have not withheld your son, your only son, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring as the stars of heaven and as the sand of the sea that is on the seashore.
Excuse me.
And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies. And in your offspring shall all the nations of the earth be blessed, because you have obeyed my voice. So Abraham returned to his young men, and they rose and went together to Beersheba, and Abraham lived in Beersheba.
Okay. All right. So let me just come back for a second. He mentions Beersheba, and then we know that this was in, so here's Beersheba, and I think, where was Moriah's over here, right? So you can get a sense of the journey there. That's a decent little trip for there. All right, coming back down to this here. So now the Lord, the angel of the Lord appears a second time, and it's interesting. It's not the Lord, but the angel of the Lord, you'll notice.
Isn't that Jesus?
Yeah, so what is the angel of the Lord? What does angel mean?
Messenger.
That's the messenger of the Lord. So there are times when God will send angels to deliver messages, but then there's this mysterious character, the angel of the Lord, the messenger of the Lord. It's a singular person who appears and who speaks as if he is the Lord himself and interacts in a way as if he's the Lord himself. So really, I think you're right. I mean, you have this idea of, I think we talked about that before, about God coming as the God, the visible and the invisible God. And so the angel of the Lord, I think this is the Son, the visible God, the one. And Jesus, how many times Jesus referred himself as the one sent from the Father? The Father sent me. So he says to Abraham, after this, let's see who came. Oh, hey, Stephanie. I see Steph online there. All right.
Hebrews says, aren't they all ministering angels?
They are ministering angels. And this is, and you're going to see lots of angels in the Bible, in the Old Testament, coming, doing the Lord's bidding. But then there's this one particular angel, the angel of the Lord, who appears. And hey, Steph.
Hey, sorry, I couldn't get it off mute. How are
That's
you?
all right.
Hey, guys.
Good to have you guys. All right, drive safe.
Nice
Eyes on the road. Okay.
Eyes on the road.
Hand signals.
Yeah, I took it off the camera because Jeff wanted to look at the phone. I'm like, honey, no.
All right. Very good. Very good. So the last time I think we had saw the angel of the Lord, was that to Hagar?
When she was off with Isaac, and she thought he was dying.
Yeah, was
Not
that
Isaac, Ishmael. Sorry, Ishmael.
Yeah, let me see. Yeah, Ishmael, wasn't it? When she sends off Ishmael. Let's see, is his offspring. She departed when the Western month.
Verse 17 of chapter 21.
21:17. God heard the voice of the boy, and the angel of God called to Hagar from heaven. Yeah. So you have this angel of the Lord, the angel of God, coming, and so he says, what does the Lord say? By myself I have sworn. Because you have done this, okay, and have not withheld your son, your only son. Again, emphasizing that. Then he says what? He uses this phrase a couple times. I will
Surely bless you.
surely. So there's a little emphasis now to that. I will surely do a few things. Bless you. And what else?
And your offspring.
Yeah, I will surely bless you, and I will surely multiply your offspring. And he says, how great will your offspring, how many will there be? Well, the stars of the heaven or the sand of the seashore. You know, it's interesting that the stars of the heaven part of it is something we don't really appreciate that much around here because of the light pollution, you don't see many stars in the sky. But if you really go to the dark skies, I know when we were in Arizona, it was dark sky area. They have special lighting, so it's really dark, so people can see the stars. And if you go out there on a clear night, especially if there's no moon, it's like a sheet of stars of just see the Milky Way is just, you can't count the number of stars out there.
And now you see them with these new telescopes, literally pointing at a totally black spot in space,
yeah,
and finding out that it's full of galaxies. I mean,
yeah,
more galaxies than we see stars.
it's so amazing, right? I mean, it's like we have, what do we have? They estimate what, a couple 100 billion stars in the Milky Way. So all the stars you see are part of our galaxy. But then you start looking with those deep space telescopes and you start seeing way out there are other galaxies out there, probably a couple 100 billion of those, each with their own billions of stars. It's insane how many that is, how big it is. And to which you have to ask the question, why does God make so many? Why is there so many stars out there? One of the answers I think that's been really helpful is when you realize that for whom did God create everything?
For the son.
And for his son. And we get to appreciate that, but he ultimately created everything for his son. And so there are parts of creation that only his son can appreciate. Yeah.
Robert Godfrey of Ligonier made a comment about that once. He never lets us come to the edge of the universe where we can be full of ourselves and say, we finally figured it out.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's no chance that you're coming to the end and you can conclude you finally figured it out.
Yeah. This is off topic a little bit more, but I think it's a good discussion. There's a great DVD series that we got called The Privileged Planet. And it was an answer to, if you remember Carl Sagan, remember that guy?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
The Cosmos, and he was an atheist astronomer type, and And his conclusion was, he looks at the there was a satellite that was sent into deep space and took a picture back at the sun from way deep space, and in that picture was just a little smudge that was the Earth. And it's like, that's us right there. Look how insignificant we are. And his conclusion was that clearly the universe does not revolve around the Earth, and therefore we're of no significance. There is no meaning, and so forth, like that. And so it just doesn't seem like we're in any place that's special. It's not like we're in the center of the universe. We're in an arm of the galaxy that's way out here in the corner. We're just third planet from the sun. There's nothing interesting about it. Well, this Privileged Planet video series says that's not true. It's true, it's not central. However, when they really looked at it, they said there is no place better to view and explore the universe than where we are in our galaxy. That God has set it up so that though we are not the center of things, yet we're able to explore and to see things that we would not be able to discover if we were in a different location. So it was kind of interesting. And they have this one video at the end, I think, where they go through. They take a spaceship. They pretend it's a spaceship leaving the Earth, looking back. What does it see as it's leaving after a year, after a light year, after millions of light years? What does it look like? And it just shows the kind of the formation of the universe and how all things are put together. And it almost looks like a DNA kind of a chain as all the galaxies are woven together and all these clusters. It's awesome. That's awesome. So anyway,
what really neat in that whole thing with Sagan too was he talks about all the history of mankind and all the tribulations of individual people and conquerors of armies and all the things that have gone on in our history. And as he pans out, it's all that has gone on that could fill history and history books. And it's just, this little speck, amongst it all.
Yeah. It's stunning. Yeah.
It's called Blue Planet? The Blue Dot or something like that.
Okay. It's called
if you search the internet, it says the tiny blue dot or something like
that.
Yeah,
and that's what the Privileged Planet is, a response to that, and really showing it's God's. Carl Sagan would basically say it's evolution or randomness about it, but they really focus about you see God's design in this. It's great stuff. All right, so he says to him, "I've sworn." Abraham passes this test of faith, and I want you to notice how the Lord. Remember, the promise is by grace through faith, that God gives grace. Everything that God has done for Abraham is grace, but he's received it all through faith. And where there is grace, there must be faith to receive it. So in Abraham is just, you can see his faith fully on display here. Now you see there's like this overabundance of grace that God is giving to him. I will surely bless you. I'm going to take it to another level of this. I'm going to multiply your offspring. I'm not going to give you the bare minimum of what I've promised, but to multiply your offspring, even as the stars of the heaven and the sand of the seashore. Just a countless people will come from you. And he says, your offspring,
the gate of the enemies.
Yeah. What do you think that means?
Well, I think if they possess the gate, they're controlling it. They can come and go. Like their enemies will basically bow to them.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the center of the city. They'd all meet at the gate to make all the decisions, and there's the center of power there.
But I want you to notice something here. Verse 17 is a little peculiar. He says, I will multiply your offspring as the stars of the heaven, right? But then he says, and your offspring shall possess the gate of
His
His.
enemies.
Singular. He's talking about one offspring.
Yeah.
You know, so
because your seed shall possess the gate of their enemies.
yeah. So this, in other words, who is the offspring of Abraham that possesses the gate of his enemies?
Ultimately, it's Jesus.
Yeah. Galatians 3 says that.
Yeah, this is the Christ. He's talking not about his offspring that he could. I would have expected him to say, "And your offspring shall possess the gate of their enemies." That all your descendants will possess that gate, but he narrows it down to the one that's coming, who will possess the gate of his enemies.
What is the footnote that D next to his?
Good question. Anybody have a footnote on theirs? I don't have it on mine. I copied and pasted it, so I don't.
Footnote for what, Bob? Or John? Jack?
17.
Where it says his, the gate of his, and there's a footnote D.
Let me see. Or it does say or there, so that does have a dual. All right, so I guess some versions have there, but this one has his. Let me see if I have a note.
I like your explanation better.
I like it better too. I think
you could almost say, "As your offspring, I will possess the gates of my enemies." I'm looking at this and I'm like, you know, we were saying at the beginning, the angel of the Lord. We're saying this is Jesus, or this. It has to be, because he says, "By myself I have sworn." Well, this is the angel saying this.
Yeah.
So this is all tying back to him.
Yeah.
If I can read here from Galatians 3:16, it says, "Now the promises were spoken to Abraham and to his seed." He does not say "and to seeds," as referring to many, but rather to one, and to your seed, that is Christ.
Yes. So Paul sees it that way, as this is the one who's coming, who's going to possess. In one sense, we will all possess. All who belong to Christ will possess the gates of the enemies, but he's the one who really. It goes along a little bit with Psalm 2, where the Lord has. I think it's Psalm 2. It talks about the same thing. I have set my son. I have. Why do the nations rage and the kings plot in vain? The Lord laughs and holds them in derision. And I've set my son and caused all the nations to honor him, all of his enemies. And your offspring shall possess the gate of his enemies, and in your offspring shall all nations be blessed. And so again, that offspring is the Christ, that one through Christ. So you're going to see this throughout the story of in Genesis, that God, the Lord in heaven, always has a man on earth, someone who he blesses people through. So he was the God of Shem in the past. He's the God of Noah. He is the God of Abraham. And then he'll become the God of Abraham and Isaac. Then he'll become the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Then he'll become the God of Israel. There's always this person or people whom he blesses. And now in the New Testament, it all becomes clear. Blessed be the God and Father of the Lord Jesus Christ, who brings it all together. There's always that one man, that Christ, that offspring.
Do you believe in this current day that there is someone that he blesses that way?
Yeah, that's Christ. It's Jesus Christ.
Continues.
And we would say, his in a physical way, we are the body of Christ now. The church is so that's why there is this blessing that people receive through us. We are the salt of the earth. We're the light of the world. And so there is a physical presence of Christ on earth in his people, his believers, Christians, especially as we gather together. So in your offspring shall all nations be blessed because you've obeyed my voice. And then we have the end of the story. What happens there?
He went home and lived happily ever after.
Yeah, until he died. Yeah. So Abraham returns to his young men, and they head back. They head back to Beersheba. Okay, great. All right, so that's the end of this story. Any comments or questions before we move on to our next section here? Well, let's go to our passage here. Rob, Roy, you want to read that for us? I'll give you the nice names to go with here. 20 to 24.
20 through 24. Okay. Now after these things, it was told to Abraham, behold, Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor. Uz, his firstborn, Buz, his brother, Kemuel, the father of Aram, Chest, Hazo, Pildash, Jildaph, and Bethuel. Bethuel fathered Rebekah. These 8 Milcah bore to Nahor, Abraham's brother. Moreover, his concubine, whose name was Reumah, bore Tebar, Gaham, Tahash, and Makar.
Whoa, good job, Rob.
Nice job. Nice job.
Hoorah!
So now we have a little bit of an extension of our genealogy because I don't know if you know what the purpose of this paragraph is. Why is he telling us these things right now? Any know offhand?
I mean, it's showing that
To hear if Rob can pronounce the words, I think.
Yeah, that's what it is. Bob, you can say something.
Yeah, well, it's showing that it wasn't just Abraham around there, that he actually had, a brother, so that there were other families growing around his.
Yes, and there is a reason why now he wants to tell us these things, though, about his brother and his brother's kids and their grandkids.
Was Buzz related to Buzz Lightyear? That's all I want
to know. That's 2 Z's for Buzz, the other Buzz. So if you'll notice, it's actually the passage in parenthesis that is the reason for this.
Yeah, Rebecca, doesn't she become the wife of
Yeah. He's introducing to us namely Rebecca. But also I'm trying to think that whole line of the family that is going to be the next drama in the story is in the next few chapters. Isaac is going to need a wife, and he's going to need a wife from the family of Terah, from Abram's side of the family. And then, Jacob is going to be getting his wives from this area too. So it's kind of setting up. So let's go through the genealogy. You remember Abraham's father, what his name was?
Tahor, or
That's close. It begins with T-E. It's Terah.
Terah, yeah.
Terah is the father. These are the generations of Terah. That's how this story begins. Even though you don't know anything about Terah, all the characters in the story, all the family of faith come from Terah. Abraham is his son. Sarah is his daughter. If you remember that. Remember their half brother?
Oh, yeah.
Isaac, of course. But then Isaac's going to marry Rebecca, who's also a descendant of Terah. And then Jacob is going to marry Rachel and Leah, who are also descendants of Terah. They all come through this one line here. There's something very special about this lineage. And again, I don't know anything about Terah himself personally, but he seems to be sort of the behind-the-scenes guy. Everyone's coming through. So we have, if you remember Abraham, Terah has 3 sons. We have Abraham. In this story, it's who?
Nahor.
Nahor, who is married to Milcah.
Right.
And then he had one more.
Yeah.
Was it Benjamin?
No, that's the later stories with.
What was when he left that city? Oh, my brain is.
He left the city that was named after his brother that had died. That is Haran.
Haran.
And Haran had a son whose name was?
Was that Lot?
That was Lot. Okay. So that's why Lot travels with Abraham, because of his because his father had died. So let's see. We'll try to do this way here. So we're going to put Lot over at the end there. So now Abraham, his son is Isaac. And we would say Ishmael as well at this point, but mainly Isaac. And then Nahor, he mentions how many sons are we talking about here? Let's go through them again.
Abraham, behold, Milcah also has borne children to your brother Nahor.
Okay.
Uz, his first. Yeah.
Okay.
And then there was Buzz.
And there was Buzz. They're not very creative in these names here. Yeah, Buzz.
Kemuel.
Okay. What was the other one? Next one?
Kemuel,
who is the father of Aram. And then there is
Tez.
I think it's I got to do the Hesed. Hazo. Pildash.
Yeah.
You might want to remember these names, Pastor, in case you and Christine ever have any more
kids. We're going to quiz you on these next week here.
Jidlaph.
Jidlaph.
With a J. Oh, okay. Yeah. Jildash is after that.
Jidlaph and Bethuel. And then there's Bethuel. Okay.
Just real quick, we're going through Job at my house in the Bible study, and we're up to Elihu, when he shows up, and he is said to be a Buzzite.
A Buzzite.
So he must have come from Buzz.
I guess so. Who was that again?
Elihu. The character in the story of Job.
Yeah.
He shows up to dump on Job and the three.
Okay, wow.
He is known as a Buzzite. So
Buzzite.
People have speculated when Job was written, and R.C. Sproul thinks that it was during the time of the patriarchs, which would make sense if he really does come from Buzz.
That would make sense. Yeah. Interesting. All right. Then we have, this is from Milcah, and then you have the concubine whose name was Reuma. So then his concubine, Reuma, who gives Tiba, Gaham, Tahash, and Maacah. Okay. All right. So those are the so we have 8 sons from Milcah, and then 4 from his concubine Reuma. But the main ones that they're gonna focus on is this, not this generation, but the next generation. Because Aram is going to be a key figure too. Aram later on, the Arameans are going to be a significant people. I think, isn't that Syria?
Yes. Yep.
They're going to play a part in the drama. And of course, Rebecca is the main one here. It's noteworthy because she is the only woman mentioned in this lineage. I mean, you've got the wife and the concubine mentioned, but everyone else is just sons. And now you have this one woman in there, Rebecca, the daughter of Bethuel. So you know where this is going. It's setting us up to help us understand, okay, Isaac is going to need to find a wife if he's going to have offspring. And where's he going to get a wife? Well, Abraham was told, Milcah has borne children to your brother. So when he had left, so that was, how long ago had he left Haran? if Isaac is, let's do the math here. Let's say Isaac's 15 years old.
Mhm.
How old is Abraham if Isaac's 15?
100 and
Wait.
something.
He was 75 when he left Haran, right?
Well, he would be
Yeah.
115 because he was 100.
115 years old,
Yeah.
which means how long ago was it that he had left Haran? Let's do your math here. 115 minus
40
75.
years.
40 years it's been now. So 40 years ago, all these things. So all these things have happened is that he is told now after 40 years that Milcah has born children to his brother. He got 8 kids, and not just those, but even one of his sons, Bethuel, has fathered a daughter, Rebecca. So that's over a period of 40 years, which means Rebecca is probably at least a teenager at this point, or so. So she'll be of maritable age very shortly. So, okay, I think that finishes up our chapter here. It's 3:10. We can get started if you want on our next section and just see how it goes. We'll do that. We got a few minutes. And I have 12% on my battery, so we should be able to make it. So let's see. Bob Thomas, would you read for us this next paragraph, 1 to 9?
Okay. Sarah lived 127 years. These were the years of the life of Sarah. And Sarah died at Kiriath Arba, that is Hebron, in the land of Canaan. And Abraham went in to mourn for Sarah and to weep for her. And Abraham rose up from before his dead and said to the Hittites, I am a sojourner and a foreigner among you. Give me property among you for a burying place, that I may bury my dead out of my sight. The Hittites answered, Abraham, hear us, my lord. You are a prince of God among us. Bury your dead in the choicest of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you his tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. Abraham rose and bowed to the Hittites, the people of the land. And he said to them, if you are willing that I should bury my dead out of my sight, hear me and entreat for me Ephron, the son of Zohar, that he may give me the cave of Machpelah, which he owns. It is at the end of his field. For the full price, let him give it to me in your presence as property for a burying place.
Okay. All right. In this passage, I always try to make note when I hear terms or phrases that are repeated. This one has a phrase, a term, a word that is repeated quite a bit in this paragraph, if you can see it.
What, bury my dead away out of my sight?
Yeah, well, yeah, he talks about this is all about a burying place here. And he says that I may bury my dead out of my sight. Here's the Lord your prince. And they say to him, bury your dead in the choice of our tombs. None of us will withhold from you this tomb to hinder you from burying your dead. Abraham rose and bowed to people, and he said to them, if you're willing that I should bury my dead, hear me and entreat from me. In the cave he owns in the field, full price give you in presence for a burying place. So this whole thing of burying place, burying your dead, burying your dead, burying your dead. What's the significance of that, about the whole idea of just burying, before we even get to what happened here? Burying the dead. What is that about? Why is that of interest to us here?
Well, if you don't bury it, the animals in that would come. It would defile their bodies.
Yeah, that's true. So it's basically So burying the dead, it protects the bodies, keeps the bodies from being eaten, at least by the wild animals, keeps the bodies from being devoured or defiled in some way. But why is that important? Why do we care?
Because we believe that our bodies will be resurrected.
Yeah, this is a belief in the resurrection here is what is significant. Again, that was not but what was the common pagan practice from most people, especially people who were sojourners like this, who wouldn't own property? Why would you buy a piece of land just to bury someone in? Why do that? Why not just
would they burn their bodies?
Yeah, the pagans would typically just destroy the bodies because there's no future for that. But here we have this belief in the resurrection. So even here, there's always this thought when God promises this land to Abraham, that there is this resurrection. Why it was so important for Abraham, for Sarah, for all these patriarchs to be buried in the land. This is like their bodies are there right now, and there is this looking forward to this resurrection to come.
So, Pastor, when did this belief in the resurrection begin? Because I always attributed it to Jesus.
Oh no! It was before. It was long before. I mean, they were. I would argue it. You see it in. You can see the first. I don't know if you can see really the first hint of it. In the early chapters of Genesis. I don't know if you know what I'm thinking of. In Genesis 5, where you have the genealogy and it talks about Enoch, being taken and not seeing death. The Lord takes him in his full body. There's no separation of body and spirit with him. He is transported body and soul into the heavenly realm somehow.
And Job says, my Redeemer lives, and from my flesh I will see him. When my flesh is destroyed, yet from my flesh I will see him.
Yeah, in my flesh, I and not another. He says, I will see God. And then Daniel, at the end of Daniel's book, he talks about when Michael will sound the trumpet and the dead will rise. It talks about the end of Daniel chapter 12, and some to everlasting glory, some to everlasting contempt. It's so it is there now. It's not as clearly spoken of as you see in the New Testament, where you see it everywhere, but it's there. It is definitely there in the Old Testament, and from early on. There is this belief in the resurrection, and in this case here, let's talk about Sarah. This is Sarah's death. Now, how old is Sarah?
127.
127 years old. So how old is Isaac?
Well, she was 90 when he had him. So
okay. So there's a little math quiz today here.
37.
37. How old is Abraham?
He's 25. He's 10 years older.
Yes.
10 years older than Sarah.
137, yeah.
He's 137. So Abraham, I believe, will live to be about 175. So he's got a ways to go. He's got another 38 years to go. But so Sarah dies, and what does it say happens here next? Where does she die?
Hebron. What is Hebron?
Hebron. Okay, in the land of Canaan. Okay. So they're in the promised land. She dies. Let me see if we can find Hebron on our map here. If we have it. Okay, there we go. They were in Beersheba, and then this is where she dies, up here in Hebron. Okay. They were in Beersheba before, and this is up Moriah. Okay. So that's where she dies, and now he's looking for a burial place for her. And he says, just as a curiosity here, to bury my dead out of my sight. I don't know if we have any notes on that, why that is, kind of phrase is that. I'm just going to take a quick look here. Let's see. I don't know if anybody have notes on that, 23. Burying you dead out of my... I don't see it. Okay. All right. So, he goes to the who does he seek a plot from? Who is he going to go to? Okay.
The Hittites.
Yeah.
Ephraim, the son of Zahor. Oh, okay, that's the one he finally gets it from.
So Abraham mourns for Sarah, and then he rises up. Then he rises to seek a burial place. Rises to seek a burial place from the Hittites here. All right, who are the Hittites?
The sons of Heth is what the NASB says.
All right. Now the Hittites are they're the people in the land. These are the Canaanites. These are maybe not at the moment, but they're going to be the future enemies of Israel. And he says, Abraham says about himself. How does Abraham refer to himself?
Sojourner?
Yeah. I am a sojourner and a foreigner. Okay. And he's looking for property. He doesn't have any property because he's a sojourner. It's a little reminder to us, for all his wealth, for all the thousands of people traveling with him, he still does not own a property. He is at the mercy of the surrounding areas, and he's going from place to place. Sojourner, foreigner. So give me property. This is the first property he will purchase here to bury his dead. The Hittites, though, how do they refer to him?
My Lord.
Yeah, my Lord.
A prince of God.
You are a prince of God among us, right? So at least at this point, you can see it's really is a tension happening here. Abraham described himself as simply a sojourner and a foreigner, someone who is weak and vulnerable, who is not to be esteemed. Yet the Hittites see him as someone of high esteem, my Lord, and you are a prince of God among us. They recognize who he really is. This is the tension of being a Christian. On the one hand, we are sons and daughters of the living God, as children of Abraham, and royalty, and yet at the same time we are sojourners and foreigners. We're nobodies in this world. There's nothing special about us, and we're despised in this world. And yet at the same time we are royal family with God. So I want to stop it there because we're kind of wrapping up here. We just got a few minutes to go. We'll come back to the story of Sarah's burial and that whole transaction.
What verse are we stopping at, Pastor?
Well, we'll come back to the beginning of the chapter again. I think we'll need to read it again. But we kind of just made a few points of the first paragraph, so we'll come back to that next time. So let me pause it here. Recording. Hang on a second.